Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. We start from Washington, where the U.S. airliners have cautioned the flying over the Persian Gulf have been warned to exercise caution amid rising U.S.-Iranian tensions. The warning came from the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration. The authority warned the airliners of the risk of being misidentified. The advisory says civil pilots flying in the region And moving on to Australia, where voting has closed in the country's 46th general election. Ballot papers are being counted and the results are expected to be announced tomorrow. More details in this report.
The Conservative Liberal National Coalition are set to lose Saturday's election. A Labour Party win could give Australia its 7th Prime Minister since 2010.
I want to back your aspirations, the things that actually drive you, your goals, your achievements, to get a job, to buy a home, to save for your retirement, to live in your retirement. And the way to stop Labor's higher taxes on all of those things is to vote Liberal and Nationals today. Today is a choice. It's a choice about who you want to continue to be the Prime Minister of this country, myself, or for Bill Shorten to be the Prime Minister of his country with higher taxes.
Either major party will need 77 seats to secure a majority in the House of Representatives. The campaign has been dominated by concerns about the economy and climate change.
That's what I'm going to do. Remote OK to the drop point.
Moving on to Syria, which has said its air defenses have intercepted missiles over Damascus fired from Israeli-controlled territory. According to state television, several loud blasts jolted the city, but there were no casualties or damage. Israel has carried out hundreds of airstrikes in Syria, most of them against what it says are Iranian and Hezbollah targets. Meanwhile, the United Nations said at least 18 health centers have been attacked in the past 3 weeks in northwestern Syria. The attacks led to a confrontation between Western powers, Russia and Syria at the Security Council. Saudi Arabia says there is no global oil shortage despite the reduction in Iranian oil exports. Energy Minister Khalid Al-Falih said OPEC will do what it can to respond to the needs of the market. Meanwhile, Iranian crude oil exports have fallen to 500,000 barrels a day following the U.S. sanctions. Since the restrictions were reimposed, global crude oil prices have risen above $70 a barrel. In another development, U.S. President Donald Trump has said imported cars pose a threat to the country's national security. Trump said the country's domestic automobile industry is threatened by excessive imports of foreign-made vehicles. But he postponed a decision to impose a 25% tariff on imported cars. He directed Ambassador Robert Lighthizer to conduct negotiations with the EU and Japan on trade issues and report back within 6 months. Meanwhile, the U.S. has reached a deal with Canada to lift tariffs on steel and aluminium imports. The 25% duty on steel and 10% on aluminium will end within 2 days. The U.S. Commerce Department said it may soon scale back restrictions on Huawei to help consumers. This comes after China downplayed chances of resuming trade talks with the U.S. IMF Managing Director Christine Lagarde said the trade war between China and the U.S. is a risk to the world economy. Moving on, Iran has urged the signatories of the 2015 nuclear deal to take concrete action to safeguard the agreement. The Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif made the remarks to the Japanese media before leaving for China. The U.S. has tightened sanctions on Iran a year after President Donald Trump withdrew from the accord. Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif said currently the international community has made statements rather than saving the deal. Recently, Iran announced it would resume the enrichment of uranium at high levels if a new nuclear agreement is not made within Europe by July the 7th. Meanwhile, increasing tensions between Iran and the US have multiplied the risk of a military confrontation in the Gulf region. Iraqis are concerned a conflict would spill over into their already war-torn country. More details in this report.
By pulling out of 2015 nuclear deal with Iran, US President Donald Trump has dismayed European allies. And now the US is ratcheting up rhetoric against Tehran. With a growing hostile situation between the two arch foes, neighboring Iraq can become a major conflict zone.
Iraq's security situation is still fragile, and if the war between the US and Iran erupts, I think Iraq would be the first to be affected. We cannot deny the fact that Iran has loyalists in Iraq, and if we want to be frank, it's the militias who are affiliated with Iran. They pose a grave danger despite the fact that Grand Cleric Sistani instructed that Iraq should dissociate itself from the US-Iran conflict.
Any escalation between the US and Iran would likely be played out at sea. Iraqis have showed apprehensions that the war could hamper goods transportation to their country.
War erupts, Iraq will become an economic conflict zone between the goods coming from neighboring countries, the capital entering Iraq, and the recommendations of the World Bank. It is the main player in this matter. Iraq will also be a backyard for the war. Foreign interests will likely be targeted by Iraqi armed groups loyal to Iran.
The crisis will have immediate global trade implications affecting shipping at the key transit point of the Strait of Hormuz.
In Britain, talks between the opposition Labour Party and the government to break the Brexit impasse have ended without any agreement. The development comes a day after Prime Minister Theresa May agreed to set out a time frame for her departure in early June. Details follow.
3 years after the referendum vote to quit the EU, Britain is still struggling to agree on how and whether to leave the EU. Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn has declared the last-ditch talks dead.
I've just written a letter to the Prime Minister, just sent it to say that these talks have now reached what I believe to be a natural conclusion. The Prime Minister has announced the date she's leaving. There have been increasing noises off stage by Conservative cabinet ministers and others who don't agree with much of the talks or any of the discussion we're holding, so we are concluding the talks.
Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn said his party would oppose May's deal when it returns to Parliament early next month. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Theresa May has appealed for public support for her Conservative Party in the upcoming EU elections. She said no one else but the Conservatives can get the Brexit deal approved by Parliament.
I want people to vote Conservative because it's only the Conservatives who can deliver Brexit and take this country forward into a brighter future.
The current deadline for Britain to leave the European Union is October 31st.
This comes a day after the Afghan Election Commission reversed its decision to use biometric devices in the upcoming voting. US envoy Zalmay Khalilzad said the election planning must go forward while the US pursues the peace Afghans deserve. Meanwhile, Afghan political parties have also criticized the Election Commission's decision. Most parties held an emergency meeting to discuss the peace process and the presidential ballot. Meanwhile, at least 8 policemen have been killed in a US airstrike during a clash with the Taliban in southern Afghanistan. 11 other policemen were wounded in the raid in Helmand province. A government spokesperson said the policemen were fighting the Taliban when they called for air support. The Interior Ministry said a joint delegation has been formed to investigate the incident. In another development, the United Nations has registered over 250,000 Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh. The United Nations has also provided identification cards to most of them. The UN Refugee Agency said the registration could help counter human trafficking. In August 2017, nearly 750,000 Rohingya fled a military crackdown in Myanmar to cross into Bangladesh. Moving on to Bangladesh now, which has been criticized by the Human Rights Watch for its crackdown on free speech. The international body called on Dhaka to stop jailing dissenters and review its draconian laws. Police arrested 2 writers and an activist this week for undermining law and order and hurting religious sentiments. All 3 were detained under the Information Communication and Technology Act and the Digital Security Act 2018. The laws seek to curb free speech, mainly in the press, and carry a maximum punishment of 14 years each. Next, Norway says it hosted high-level talks to broker a solution to Venezuela's political crisis. The Norwegian government says it made early contact with the representatives of Venezuela's main political parties. Details follow.
A power struggle between President Nicolas Maduro and opposition leader Juan Guaido began in January. Guaido, backed by the US and many Latin American governments, has called for a military coup against Maduro since last month. But the government contained the situation. Reports of a meeting between the 2 sides in Norway's capital Oslo emerged on Thursday. Guaido confirmed he sent an envoy to Norway.
There is no negotiation. Again, I repeat it and I say it clear. This is an effort of Norway in a mediation that, by the way, has been going on for months.
But he denied that talks had been held with Maduro's delegation. Maduro said his representatives went to Norway to seek a peaceful agenda for the country. He thanked Norway for his mediation efforts to build a dialogue with the Venezuelan opposition.
In Sudan, hundreds of protesters have torn down barricades in a bid to resume talks on the handover of power to civilians, but they warned the ruling military council of more road closures if it does not respond to their demands. The military council had linked a resumption of dialogue with removal of the barricades. Having achieved significant breakthroughs, the talks were suspended by the military this week after the killing of 6 people. The discussions were held under a deal on the makeup of a new transitional council. Moving on, Germany's Sea-Watch humanitarian organization has rescued 65 migrants off the coast of Libya. They were making their voyage in a rubber dinghy. Libya's western coast is a main departure point for African migrants to reach Europe. They have to pay human traffickers in the hope of reaching the continent. The rescued people, including children, were traveling on a crowded boat. Improved efforts to close smuggling networks have recently reduced the numbers of people making the hazardous journey. Meanwhile, Sri Lanka will commemorate the 10th anniversary of the end of the 30-year war against the Tamil Tigers on Sunday. The Tigers aim to create a separate homeland for the island nation's Tamil minority. 10 years ago, Sri Lanka's brutal civil war ended after the death of over 100,000 people. At its peak in 2001, the conflict had displaced 800,000 Sri Lankans. The government still has to return land confiscated after the war. The UK should block legislation that would give amnesty to war criminals, says the UN Committee Against Torture. The committee says all British personnel accused of torture or ill treatment should be held accountable. This report has more.
This week, Britain's Ministry of Defence announced plans to grant immunity for torture-related offences committed over 10 years ago. British veterans of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, as well as the troubles in Northern Ireland, are most likely to benefit from the move. The UN Rights Committee Against Torture has condemned the decision.
In our conclusions on the UK and with regard specifically to the accountability for abuses in Iraq, we also make it absolutely clear, paragraph 33 of the last sentence, the state party should refrain from enacting legislation that would grant amnesty or pardon where torture is concerned.
The UN committee also backed calls for independent inquiries into renditions involving torture. Already, it added, conflict-related acts of mistreatment and death are not being investigated.
That there are extensive number of allegations that the Historical Allegations Team, the IHAT, received, that the these cases were then transferred to the service police, and the service police legacy investigation closed 1,100 out of 1,200 of the allegations.
Amnesty International UK's section has backed the UN Committee Against Torture's criticism.
Moving on to Europe, the possibility of new gun laws in Switzerland has stirred strong debate between pro-gun enthusiasts and their opponents. The new rules would make it harder to buy semi-automatic rifles and pistols with large capacity magazines. More in this report.
Gun control has often been a controversial, difficult topic, especially with a worldwide rise in gun violence. Following the Paris terror attacks, the EU set out new gun laws in 2017. Under new rules, semi-automatic rifles and pistols with large capacity magazines could only be bought under set conditions.
Switzerland is one of the safest countries in the world, but it is also one of the countries with the highest number of guns. So are guns really the problem? No.
The non-EU member Switzerland must adopt the new regulations to remain part of Europe's Schengen open border system. The country's parliament and government back the arrangements. Swiss Socialist National Councillor Brigitte Crottaz says there would be a price for losing.
It would be detrimental to security should the law be rejected and ousted of Schengen in Switzerland, but also detrimental to tourism since there won't be Schengen visas anymore.
But Swiss gun enthusiasts see things differently.
I'm really worried for the future of my sport because I fear we may lose shooters with this law. I think they won't stop here, and this law is only the beginning. What they really want is to disarm everyone. That is really their goal. We are no fools.
Opinion polls suggest 2 out of 3 voters back the tougher controls the EU embraced in 2017.
Mothers in Libya's Misrata city send food parcels every day to their sons fighting on the outskirts of Tripoli. The food parcels are dispatched with poems and messages of love for the soldiers.
In Libya, women are waging a war at the culinary front. Around 100 women work in 2 shifts a day to prepare iftar meals for their sons, risking their lives in Tripoli.
With a warm heart, we came to motivate and encourage our sons. We are on the front line, to the point that we printed letters and distributed them among each other.
The food donated by
and continue the work the next day. When everyone comes, and if there is anything that we still need, they help us provide it. They are good people. They are also people who donate money, and we also buy meals. The number of meals reaches up to 2,500.
The mothers say their aim is to motivate the fighters and keep them in touch with home. They are convinced the messages attached with the parcels bring consolation to their sons.
For our sons and for the sake of the nation, we are ready to pay a dear price for the homeland, and for Misrata especially, because it gave us a lot and it is our duty to give back, even if it is a small part of what our children have given us and what this good country has given us.
Misrata's fighters have a reputation as Libya's best organized. They were at the forefront of the revolt 8 years ago that overthrew Muammar Gaddafi.
11 nations, including Singapore, Japan and New Zealand, have gotten together for a landmark trade deal. They agreed to slash tariffs across much of the Asia-Pacific region in a revamped version of the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
There is rising protectionism in the world. We face more tariff and non-tariff barriers by the month around the world, and there are major threats to the multilateral rules under the World Trade Organization and their operation. Through CPTPP, the countries that are in it have managed to write their own insurance policy as between themselves.
Meanwhile, Buddhists around the world are celebrating Vesak Day. The day commemorates the birth, enlightenment and passing of Gautama Buddha, the founder of Buddhism. Vesak is celebrated once a year on the first full moon of the ancient lunar month of Visakha. Buddhists go to temples to reflect on Buddhist teachings, bring offerings and share food with people. The third leg of China's Dragon Boat tournament is well underway in eastern Jiangsu province. This year, 55 teams from across the country have made their way to Yanchang city to take part in 100, 500 and 1000 meter races. First held in 2011, this competition is China's top-level dragon boat race. Each team accumulates a score based on the result of each race, which is held in different cities. The team with the highest score claims the championship. The annual tournament is part of the Duanwu or Dragon Boat Festival, which opens this year on June the 7th. Local communities are waging a war to save Madagascar's Wahibola forest. Over half of the forest has been destroyed by loggers and slash-and-burn farmers. Details follow.
Madagascar's forests are home to some of the world's most exotic creatures, but it is not just animals who depend on Madagascar's forests to survive. Forests like the Wahibola attract tourism and economic activity, which Madagascar's people depend on. Now people's livelihood is being destroyed by loggers and climate change.
There is no more rain. Water resources are becoming insufficient. The land is getting poorer. We are already struggling to water our crops. As soon as I heard that there was a forest to protect, I immediately ran to join the ranks of the rangers. Young people of my age must understand that it is important to save the forest.
Tour guides like Jean Merlin blame local authorities and corruption more than the loggers themselves. Now locals have taken the matter to court.
For the first time, we are taking local authorities to court for abuse of power, for the destruction of the forest, defamation and arbitrary arrests.
Animals like lemurs and the Stumpfea pygmy frog are unique to Madagascar. This means failure to protect the island's forests will result in the extinction of these species.
Here is an interesting news. The world's first car built from Lego bricks has been unveiled in Denmark. The life-size Bugatti Chiron is now on display at the Lego house in Bulletin. Details follow.
Most children around the world know or have used Lego bricks. Now the company has put its bricks on the line by building a drivable car, all in Lego. A model of the world's fastest production car, the Bugatti Chiron, has been built using over 1 million Lego Technic bricks. The model car weighs in at 1.5 tons and uses absolutely no glue.
Well, there is a lot of unique with this car, but you could say basically we have built the car made up of standard Lego Technic elements you find in every single Lego Technic SKU: gear wheels, connectors, beams, motors. That we have accomplished actually to put into a 1.5 ton car and made it drive. That's pretty unique.
The Lego car took 8 months to develop, using up to 13,438 hours of construction time. Seating capacity is enough for 2 people, and that all-important top speed is an astonishing 20 kilometers per hour.
It's the ultimate dream, you know. The small kid inside me wanted to build large cars ever since there was a kid. So yeah, this passion to build something new and to just do something that wasn't here before, that's something that drives me.
The car has been constructed in France using 339 different types of bricks.
We've got a story for you, a food adventure. A French-trained chef is bringing ant larvae to the menu of his Los Angeles restaurant. The chef is confident the American palate will embrace what he calls Mexican caviar. Details follow.
Ant larvae or escamol have been a delicacy in Mexico since pre-Columbian times. Now Chef Fernando Villagomez hopes the dish will attract adventurous foodies to his beachside restaurant.
It's crazy. crazy delicious for real. I mean, it's not new for me because I've been eating all my life. But for people here, it's like, wow. And I really ask people to give them the opportunity to try it. It's a new experience.
These aren't just any larvae either. They come from agave plant roots from his home state of Guanajuato, Mexico. The investment this required was considerable. His supplier sells to restaurants at $180 per kilo.
The ants where the escamoli come from is a specific ant. It's not just random ant. These ants, they are, you know the big plants we call agaves, where the tequila coming from? That's the ants. So you have that flavor as a cactus, kind of like not tequila yet, but like, you know, this like herbal flavor.
Chef Fernando Villagomez says the dish has a nutty, buttery taste. They also pick up a herbal flavor from where the ants nest.
It's really, really good. I like how it all kind of blends together, and then you kind of take this and kind of pair it together, and it's amazing.
For now, the larvae seem to be a success.
Oh, and I love the avocado salsa.
A look into the world of sports now. Starting with basketball, the Milwaukee Bucks have won their second game of the Eastern Conference Finals against the Toronto Raptors. The 125 points to 103 victory enabled the Bucks to lead the 7-game series by 2-0. Playing at Wisconsin's Fiserv Forum, the Milwaukee Bucks conveniently sealed their second victory of the final series. Power forward Giannis Antetokounmpo dominated Raptors' defense throughout the game. Antetokounmpo scored 30 points, grabbed 17 rebounds and added 5 assists for the Bucks. Kawhi Leonard scored 31 points for the Raptors, but they fell short 22 points to tie the series. The third contest of the 7-game series is scheduled for Sunday.